That's so bizarre to me that it seems like only a few years ago, like the radical feminists and a lot of radical feminists have stayed, true to their values. But in the name of not offending anybody with a different gender identity, I've heard women called like menstruators and bodies with vaginas, and like feminists from only a couple of years ago would have said this is like dehumanizing to women, and now it's like the appropriate way to speak.
Yeah, it's pretty insane because also when you look at it, it is very clearly an attack on women. Like you say, women are called uterus havers and menstruators and bleeders and pregnant people and chest feeders. We don't see this same attack on men's language. We don't see men being called, oh, you're the inseminating parent or the, ejaculator or, prostate owner. It's not an attack on men in the same way that it is on women. Of course, it's an attack on all of humanity, but overtly it is very much an attack on women. And yeah, I think radical feminists are some of the only feminists who are pushing back on this. Mainstream liberal feminism embraces this, and where I would say this movement is very patriarchal because it's about men's right to define women. What could be more patriarchal than that? Uh, Mainstream liberal feminism has embraced it as a push against gender roles when in fact it's very much an embrace of gender roles. And as a someone with also a psychology background yourself, I always tell people just read the actual diagnosis for gender dysphoria, and those diagnostic criteria that are right there in the DSM for gender dysphoria, they are all stereotypes. They're all stereotypes based on sex. So this is a very regressive ideology.
And so it was on that day that I realized when they said trans women are women, they meant trans women are women. They meant it. They meant that they're women. I didn't know that. I thought we were all just pretending that these men were women to be kind. I also realized that some of them believed themselves to be lesbians because I saw under JK's tweet that trans activists were arguing with lesbians. They were fighting, and lesbians were saying, no, we're not attracted to people with penises, and they would be called bigots for that. So I came across the concept of the male lesbian. And then really I just became obsessed with the issue because it was just so mad. And at this point, it was still kind of clownish. Men who think they're women, male lesbians, that's just some kind of stupid 1970s homophobic joke.
So you have like both Matt Walsh, and you have Helen Lewis on the one hand agreeing on so much, but, then you'll have Matt Walsh talking about, really the importance of gender roles and how like we should really encourage femininity among girls, and they should appreciate that, and that's really the way forward. And then those like Helen Lewis, Helen Joyce. Well, both of them talk about it. But Helen Joyce saying that, when girls are confined to understanding femininity like that, that's exactly what sent them running away, that they don't want to be limited, that they want to feel like they could express themselves and do whatever they want, and they're not limited to, patriarchal views of what women should be. So it's interesting, like who knows which approach is going to help women accept themselves more. I do think it's interesting. Like I love Google Trends, and if you look at 2015, right, and you're like, you notice like feminism in 15, there's a deep dive in people's interest in feminism. Simultaneous like the interest in top surgery or things like
Really?
that.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, you could double check me, but that's what I saw. Like there were so many. Like I do think that part of like there's the ideological like born in the wrong body, which doesn't really mean anything. You're not born into a body. You're born as a body, right? So like this idea, like okay, so once you get past that, we understand like people assume identities. There are some identities that are, obvious and fixed, and there are some that, you could pick up, like goth or something like that. Like, identity studies are fascinating, and we have various motivations to pick up different identities and which identities we want to hide. So I think like if someone if like a girl loves being a woman and loves everything about it, they're going to be less likely to want to not be that. And if they hate being a woman, and there's a lot of reasons to hate being a woman, right? I think biologically there are those challenges, right? I think the how often they're victimized and the victim of a lot of violence, right? I think like the more associations you have with all the negative aspects of womanhood, and then there's this option to identify away from it, like it will seem much more enticing than if you have a very positive, like, I love being a woman. Being a woman is amazing, right? So really helping girls, like in terms of like a prophylactic approach to this, is helping girls, love womanhood and figuring out how we as a society could really reinforce that message, I think would be very helpful, versus either A, kind of really just hyper focusing on the victimization, or hyper focusing on the the patriarchy, right? And I think it's important to have a message that for girls, that it's awesome to be a woman, right? That there's something very special about it, and things that are uniquely feminine, like the ability to make a person with your body and feed that person, like that's so cool, right? And it's not seen that way. I think when you got to the point where it was kind of seen as like as like some sort of servitude, right? And it's something to be looked down on, like I'm a stay-at-home mom, like I imagine that came along with the idea that this isn't a unique advantage. There's only disadvantage to being a woman. And I think that's part of what we're seeing, is like the moving away from appreciating the identity.
There's this kind of vulnerability that women and girls have, like a natural vulnerability. And I think there's this intrinsic understanding that, women and girls are vulnerable to male physical and sexual violence in every society throughout all of human history, probably most other species as well. And you're training people, like a 12-year-old girl, when a man in a dress comes in the restroom with you, say, this instinct that you have, that you need to be aware of this threat, suppress that and call that a woman. Like, that's just, if you were to look at, a feminist perspective from 10 years ago, this would be horrific.
Yeah. I mean, there was like this moment, there was this Me Too moment that just like, it kind of happened for a while. It took over, and all of these women were, coming up with their stories and sharing their traumas, and really being encouraged to stand firm in their boundaries, to say, no, we will not accept that behavior. This kind of behavior is inappropriate, and we demand better, we deserve better. Yeah. And now there's literally girls who are being vilified and called bigots and transphobes because they don't want boys in their locker room. I put up a video today. It was created by Hi Ho YouTube channel for children, which has like 5 million subscribers. And the whole video is a man in a dress talking to kids about what is trans. And there's a girl who looks to be, I would say maybe she's 11-ish, 12 maybe. And she's like, oh, sorry. Like, I kind of knew you were trans. Like, I kind of noticed. And the guy's like, what do you mean you noticed? And she's like, well, I could kind of tell because of your voice. Like, she is being made to feel embarrassed and insecure and ashamed because she accurately recognized him as a man. So instead of like, yeah, like you say, instead of feminists like standing up and being like, good on you, girl, like name your instincts, hold your boundaries, say what you see, speak the truth. She feels embarrassed and ashamed and insecure because she has a functioning sex recognition capacity.
What can you tell me about kids you're seeing that look similar to you? I mean, like, to me, it looks like kids a generation ago who would have been either band kids or theater kids. Like, now they're non-binary and they're getting funneled into this. Like, what kind of kids are you seeing that get funneled into this thing?
Well, I mean, it does seem to still hit like perhaps the spectrum, right? The awkward kid, the maybe the socially, like it's a fu. I mean, in some ways it's great, like fu to the gender expectations, but I'm going to do that by saying that girls only wear makeup, right? Like it's so bizarre because it relies completely on stereotypes. So I don't understand why teens aren't picking up on how this is not progressive at all in any way, shape, or form. It's really oppressive.
It seems like the addiction revolves around all of society affirming that delusion. That's wow.
It is about control. Yeah. And if you cannot control what people say, think this pronoun whole thing, do you know Benjamin Ryan online? Do you know who that
Oh
guy?
yeah, I had him on here.
Okay. Okay. Well, I've had some arguments with him.
Oh yes, I think I've seen that.
He thinks that that using someone's opposite sex pronouns is polite, but to me, this whole notion that people want to control how you refer to them in the third person when they're not even in the room, that is a level of control that is just ghastly to me. Like, you want to control how I refer to you when you're not even there to see it. No. No.
It's kind of interesting because Benjamin Ryan would agree with you around the science of gender transition. But it's like, from your perspective, it's like this whole thing is like an elaborate game of pretend, and I don't feel like playing your game anymore. And he's like, well, we could condemn the science, but we still kind of need to play the game of pretend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what he's saying. And he also, I think he has a lot of empathy for the men who pretend to be women, and I don't, because it's offensive to me. If you want to, like Kurt Cobain, I like Kurt Cobain. He wore dresses. He wore some of those Natalie Merchant style dresses. Like that's fine to me. Like, it's, again, like wearing wearing clothes that we have, traditionally said are for the opposite sex. I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem with like facial feminization surgery and growing breasts. And that to me is a fetish. That's fetish. That's a fetishization of women. That's not just wearing clothes that are usually sold to women. That is something more. And to imply that is at all related to being a woman, it is such a masculine display. It is completely unrelated to my biology. Men who reject their sex and hyperfixate on femininity and attempt to mask their secondary sex characteristics and hypersexualize themselves in a very feminine way, that is a masculine display that is unrelated. It is completely unrelated to what it is to actually be a woman. And so to call this fantasy display womanhood, to refer to these men as women, to refer to these men with she, her pronouns, it is so, I want to say the F word, but it is so effing disrespectful to women, to your mother. It is so disrespectful to your mother's labor, your mother who literally labored to bring you into this world. The level of disrespect to do that cosplay and call it womanhood. No, I shall not be referring to any of these men as she, her. No, thank you. F their disrespect to women. No.
There's another aspect of the female psyche that is both heartening and disheartening, of how often women become the most vocal supporters of whatever movement. They're the most... Yeah.
That's something so interesting, because if you look at kind of the social justice movement as a whole, on one side, you've got this Me Too side of things that's like, hey, men need to step up and, you know, take some pride in protecting women. And then
Yeah.
men are like, hey, these men that are going into the changing room with you, that's sending off some red flags here. And they're like, shut up, you're a bigot. You know?
Right.
Something's not adding up.
I started speaking about this issue from the perspective of embodiment, actually, right when J.K. Rowling was talking about this. I wrote this essay called I stand with J.K. Rowling is the new #Me Too. And I really was just like, you know, this is a woman talking about women's right to talk about our unique biology. Anyway, I got attacked for this by my town. And yeah, right after that, we went into COVID. And right after that, Biden was, I think, or was Biden elected? Whatever. Biden came into office that year, that right after COVID had happened. And during COVID, myself, Kara Dansky, if you know who she is, and a number of other women organized an event called Women Picket DC, and we protested right after he came into office. It happened in March, the event, and I think we had maybe about 200 women show up for that event. Dr. Suzanne Veerling was there. A number of other prominent activist women were there, Kay Yang. And we stood up. Jennifer Thomas was there. Anyway, a number of women who have done a lot of activism in the United States went to that event, and that was the beginning. So we protested that executive order putting gender identity in at the federal level. And since then, I've probably personally been to about, I guess, maybe 15 or so protests. And then on my YouTube channel, I haven't done it in a while, but I used to live stream any woman who was going to protest. I would put it up on my live stream. So I have, you know, I think I have like 30 or 40 protests up on my YouTube channel. And the biggest one that I personally organized was for Julie Jamon in my town. So Julie Jamon was an 80-year-old woman in my town, Port Townsend, Washington, who stood up in the YMCA against a man who was in the women's locker room helping little girls with their bathing suits. She was in the women's locker room. She was changing in the stall, changing out of her swimming suit when she heard a man's voice and was like, what is happening? Looked out and, you know, saw that there's a man with little girls. She told him to get out. And then, of course, she was called a bigot and a transphobe, and that she was harassing him, and that he was apparently staff and he was allowed to be there. And we held a protest for her in front of City Hall in Port Townsend. There was maybe 25 of us who stood up to speak. And we were met with about 300 protesters, maybe more. I had put out a press release for the event because I had done some other events already, so I had some press contacts. And I put out a press release, and obviously it got way out. And we had Antifa from Seattle and Portland and all over attacking us, surrounding us, just like screaming at us. And that event went really viral, and Julie eventually, you know, she got on Tucker Carlson, and ended up having a lawsuit, which actually just got settled. They settled a lawsuit with her. She got a nice amount of money for that, but yeah, that was kind of the biggest one. And then I've done a lot of others. I've, you know, protested in front of the United Nations. I've protested in front of the ACLU. I've protested at the Seattle Korean spa event where a man was in the women's Korean spa. I was at the NCAA's against Leah Thomas. So I was there, you know, before Riley Gaines was speaking out. We were there protesting Leah Thomas on her and other swimmers' behalf. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I mean, there's some other noteworthy ones, but I was, protested in front of New York City Hall. Um, yeah, I've been a lot of places trying to stand up for women and girls' boundaries on this issue and for free speech as well, for our right to speak about these issues.